Real quick before I get into this week's Q&A, I came across a question this week that was actually pretty awesome. It wasn't even a question, it was kind of more of a statement. But this was from Matthew Sidley, who says, Quincy, want to say I love your content. And my 8-year-old son, starting QB in a 10, 11-year-old T3 Performance League, loves your content. So I wanted to give a shout out to the championship winning team down there in T8. I want to give a shout out to that team's starting quarterback, Keegan. I'm looking forward to seeing him make that jump to the 12-year-old, 13-year-old league. You know, it's going to get a little bit bigger, a little bit tougher. We're going to see if he has the arm strength to hang in there. But you know what? I think Keegan, a championship winning quarterback in himself, is going to be able to make that jump there. So Keegan, before I start this video, I wanted to give a shout out to you, bud. What's up, guys? My name is Quincy Carrier, and this is a show Q&A where I take your questions from YouTube and Twitter. And again, if you want to ask these questions and have them be featured on the show, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I put the question prompt up. And I put that question prompt up Thursdays at 7:30 in the morning. So if you want to be first to ask a question for next week's show, make sure you're subscribed and make sure you're notified. Without further ado, let's jump into the questions. And the first one is from Tommy Murray, who says, do you think Nick Chubb's top 100 rating was fair, seeing that Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey were both in the top 10? Now, you know, I have said a lot about these stupid rankings in the last few weeks, and the Nick Chubb one is bad. It's just as bad as Myles Garrett at 80. It's just as egregious, although it's not as far off as Myles Garrett at 80. Like, Myles Garrett would be ranked where Nick Chubb was if, you know, things were done fairly, even including the fact that he did miss 6 games because he got suspended. If they were ranking this based on play on the field, that production Myles had in 10 games is still good enough in a 16-game sample to put him where Nick Chubb was, which is mid-30s. Nick Chubb should have probably been in the top 25. You had guys like Aaron Jones ranked ahead of Nick Chubb, which is just egregious. And especially since the criteria for this list is best players from that 2019-2020 season. And especially like Saquon Barkley being ahead of Nick Chubb on a list that's ranking only this season, it's ridiculous. Like, look at Nick Chubb's stats and compare them in every way, shape, and form to somebody like Saquon Barkley and tell me who's 31 and who's 36 and tell me if this list wasn't ridiculous at some points. And again, it's a player-voted list, and player-voted lists tend to be lists that are made off of reputation and hype. Who had a ton of hype? Saquon Barkley has a ton of hype. So that hype carried in to this ranking because he wasn't great, but he wasn't awful. But, you know, this is just how this list goes. People get overranked and overlooked all the time. And, you know, it's just a shame that Nick Chubb had the season that he had, and, like, nobody outside of Cleveland cares to, you know, show him respect for that season, or at least give him a proper respect for that season. They had a chance to with this list, and they missed the mark, wide of the mark. So yeah, Nick Chubb's ranking is ridiculous. He's much better than Aaron Jones. He's much better last year than Saquon Barkley. And I get Saquon Barkley might be a more talented back and might be the better back overall. But again, this list was ranking the 2019 season. And you cannot make a good argument to me that Saquon Barkley had a better 2019 than Nick Chubb. There's just no way you can make a sound and acceptable argument in that direction. If you can, try to make it in the comment section below, but I just don't think an argument exists to justify that ranking with that criteria. It just doesn't. And again, rankings like that, and again, it's not just Browns players. There are players all over the NFL that have been ranked poorly on this list. I mentioned a few of them. Marlon Humphreys is horribly underranked here, behind his number 2 corner, Marcus Peters. Keenan Allen was horribly underranked here. You know, a ton of guys across the league. And again, it's those kind of rankings that kind of just devalue the top 10 to me, because I just don't care about it anymore after that, because it just doesn't seem legitimate or valid. Like, even if, let's say, Nick Chubb tops this list next year, I'm not going to care. I just don't think this is a valid way to rank players. If you want a list that's just going to entertain people, sure, this is a perfect way to do it. But if you want a list that's actually accurate, that somebody can watch and maybe they don't follow the whole 2019 season and watch this 100 ranking and get a good feel about who's good and who's not in the NFL, then this is not the way to do it. So I don't know what the producers are going for that show, but it seems like they're going for the shock value, which is fine if that's what they want to do. It's just I'm not going to care about where players are ranked where anymore if that's the case. But good question there. Next question coming from Zach R., who says, just now I'm seeing that the Panthers cut Gano, and I know how you feel about Austin Seibert. What do you think of the Browns possibly picking up Gano, and how much money would you give him? You don't have to give him much because he just got cut. But, I would say if you can bring in Gano to compete with Austin Seibert, understanding that this is not his job, then do it. Definitely do it. The Browns aren't going to need, hopefully, if everything goes along the plans, they're not going to need a great field goal kicker. They're not going to need Sebastian Janikowski to make 50 and 60-yard field goals. They're going to need someone who's reliable short range and reliable at extra points. And Austin Seibert is only one of those two things. He's reliable short range field goals, but he's not great at extra points. So if we can get Gano in here, I don't know what his field goal percentage was last year, but he wasn't at the bottom like Austin Seibert was. And if he can do league average there and be good enough under 40, yeah, it makes a lot of sense for the Browns. Next question comes from Casey Kinnaman, who says, Quincy, what are your feelings on fake crowd noise being pumped in the First Energy Stadium? Hey, man, I'm at the point to where if you could just get the game on the field, I really don't care about the particulars surrounding it. I'm not going to be picky. I'm not going to sit here and complain about the crowd noise. I just want football. So if you can find a way to get the 11 men on the field for each team and it just resemble football, I'm fine with it. I don't care if they pump fake crowd noise in. I don't care if they reduce capacity. I don't care if there's no fans at this point. I just want to make sure there's a season because we're not at a point to where this whole season thing is guaranteed. It's very frivolous, if anything, at this point. So pump it in fake crowd noise. If that's what we got to do to make sure we got a season, do it. Pump in the fake crowd noise. And also a note on crowd noise. If teams are going on this route of like having limited capacity, I saw like the Browns might think about having like less than 25,000 fans and everything. As somebody who has watched like small level or lower level non-major football, let me tell you something. Anything above 10,000 fans, it's going to make enough noise to where you don't care, to be honest. Like, once you get up to 10,000 fans and more, it's going to make the same amount of noise, especially like if you get to 20, 30,000. You can have a home field advantage with 30,000 fans with a half-full NFL stadium. You can get it loud enough with 30,000 people. So, again, the limited capacity, pumping in crowd noise, whatever you got to do it. Honestly, like, I just want to make sure there's a season at this point. So the particulars really don't matter to me as much as nailing down the fundamentals so we can have this season. And if it requires fake crowd noise, whatever, I'll deal with it for a year, hopefully a year, not two, but a year or two. I'll deal with it if that gets football on the field, because that is the first requirement and the first thing to worry about. Next question comes from Wyatt Wickoff, who says, hey, Quincy, want to ask you, do you think there will be televised inter-squad scrimmages as preseason to give fans something to watch? Now, the Browns have already announced that they're going to live stream practices for 2 hours to make up for the lack of training camp events. So they're going to have camp practices not televised, but live stream on their website or on YouTube for 2 hours. And of course, I will be putting up a reaction to each of those once those streams are done. So don't worry about that. Also, it would make sense, right? Because WEWS, Channel 5, ABC in Cleveland, and I'm pretty sure there are other smaller affiliates, are going to want to be able to recoup some of the TV money they would make from those 4 preseason games. So it would make sense if they got together with the Browns and said, hey, how about we do a weekly inter-squad scrimmage or 2 inter-squad scrimmages to make up for what you won't be delivering on your local TV deal, and the Browns could televise that and put it on TV and make it kind of an event. And do things like that. And that will probably pave the door to have more televised training camp events down the road, which is probably going to happen because the NFL owners are going to want to put more money in their pockets, and that's another way to do so. So, yeah, I think that might be possible. It hasn't been announced. The only thing that's been announced is that they're going to be streaming training camp live on clevelandbrowns.com. So that's what we know. What we don't know is how far will that go? Will they have some televised events? Because I agree with you. I think something like that will work out. But again, that's going to be down to each coach and how they want to prepare for the season. And listening to some of Kevin Stefanski's press conferences, it doesn't seem like he's going to be in a rush to kind of force that. So I don't think it's very likely, but it'd be cool. This question comes from Willie Anderson, who says, "Hey, Quincy, hope all is well." It is. Love the channel, by the way. Thank you. In your opinion, I want to know this. Is there any moves left for Andrew Berry to make as far as bringing in talent to help on either side of the ball? Who could/would it likely be? Now, I made a video about this earlier this week, but for those who did not see it, please make sure you check it out. But long story short, Mike Daniels and Sean Lee are the two guys I would bring in. You need a veteran presence. And I get the rebuttal from some folks out there that, you got Jordan Elliott, you got Jacob Phillips in the draft. Why not let your young guys get reps? Maybe for other Browns teams that would be fine, right? Browns teams that weren't trying to win the division or make the playoffs. Browns teams where the end goal wasn't to win it all. Browns teams that were rebuilding. But now it doesn't make sense. You need veteran leadership and known quantities now on defense more than you need potential and upside. So if you're going to have to sacrifice some of that for this season to put Mike Daniels and Sean Lee on the field, then do so, because you need to, because the Browns aren't in a situation where they can just see how things go with a rookie and a second-year linebacker starting, or see how things go if Jordan Elliott, who was drafted to be a project, can he step in there and stop the run when he wasn't really great at that in Missouri? No. Get some known quantities. Mike Daniels might not be able to get to the quarterback anymore, but he can stop the run. You know that. That's a known thing. Sean Lee can get everybody in position and make sure the train comes on time at the linebacking position. You don't know if he's going to be on the field all season, but that's why you have Jacob Phillips. That's why you have Jordan Elliott. Those are backup plans to the main plan. But for the Browns, they need known quantities in veteran leadership more than they need upside right now. So that's why I would make the move for those veterans. They might not be in their prime anymore. They're definitely not in their prime anymore. They're way past the hill, but they still have a small bit to offer, and what they have to offer is exactly what the Browns need, and that they can give you that. So get it. The next question comes from Harold Harrison, who says, "Do you really think we're going to have football?" As I mentioned earlier, it's kind of frivolous right now, right? I don't think you can do this without some sort of a bubble. Now, from listening to what the Browns are doing, it seems like they're doing a bubble, but then letting players go home. I think in order to make sure this season finishes out, either you're going to need tremendous restraint and precautions taken by players, which I don't think is very likely. I don't think every player is going to do that. Or you're just going to have teams restrict players to their own bubble. And I think that's eventually what's going to happen. And again, that's going to be a fairly easy adjustment to make. Most teams have a ton of hotels or a few hotels in the vicinity of their training camp facility. There are teams like Cincinnati that don't have a dedicated training camp facility, but most times those teams are located downtown, so that means they have access to better hotel facilities than most other teams do. So I think that's what the Browns are going to have to do. I think that's what the NFL is going to have to do to ensure that there's football, is to just have each team have its own lockdown bubble, and then you let them travel privately to these games, and then they play, and then you lock down into the bubble again. You might need something more complex if like a massive breakout happens before the season starts, or like during the beginning parts of the season. You might, But as of right now, I think all that's necessary is that they're probably going to extend these precautions to just adding players' home lives to that bubble. Now, this is going to get pushback from the players because they're going to say this wasn't in the package when we had our opt-out deadline, so they might want a new opt-out deadline. I don't know what's going to happen there, but I think in order for this season to finish, that's probably going to have to happen, unless the NFL can just get extremely lucky. Now, it's not likely, but they can get lucky and just get through the season and, and not really have that much of an effect. But I think they need to make more precautions in order to ensure that this season can be finished, because finishing this season is way more important than starting it on time. So we'll see. This question comes from Nick Mayfield, who says, "Hey, Quincy, my question is, who are the players in the AFC North that scare you when you play the Browns?" Well, when they play the Browns. So who are the players in the AFC North that scare me? Lamar Jackson is definitely on that list. Let's see. Who else would I say scares me on the Ravens? Nobody else really scares me on the Ravens yet. We'll see. They made some additions to the defense, but Earl Thomas doesn't really scare me that much. Nobody in their secondary. Marcus Peters doesn't scare me. Marlon Humphreys is very good. He doesn't scare me necessarily. So I would say Lamar Jackson is the only guy who scares me on the Ravens. I'm on the Steelers. TJ Watt usually has some pretty productive games against the Browns. Big Ben has big games against the Browns. I don't know where he's at physically yet, but we'll see. But if he's anything like he used to be, he's something worth being afraid of. Other than that, nobody else really on the Steelers scares me all that much. I mean, Cam Hayward's always good, but that's more annoying than it is scary. In the Bengals, AJ Green should scare me, but the Browns actually have had a really good history against AJ Green. It's weird, but the Browns have never really been killed by AJ Green. So AJ Green just doesn't scare me like he scares the Baltimore Ravens. But yeah, I would say those are the two guys, 2-3 guys that scare me is TJ Watt, sometimes Ben Roethlisberger. We'll see what he's like to start this season. And then, of course, the MVP, Lamar Jackson. This question comes from Giants Nation, who says, "What's up, Quincy? I got a great question. Last week, someone asked you who are your favorite Browns players of all time. This question is, who is your favorite non-Browns player of all time?" I always loved Peyton Manning. I loved Cam Newton. Cam Newton was one of the funnest players to watch when he was in his early days in Carolina. Russell Wilson also is a big favorite of mine. Again, another guy who's just very fun to watch, electrifying. Just so much fun to watch. I would watch a Russell Wilson game regardless of who he's playing. So I would say those three, Cam, Peyton, and Russell Wilson, would be three of my favorite non-Browns currently playing in the NFL. And also I would say Adrian Peterson. 2012 to 2013 specifically, Adrian Peterson is one of the funnest players to ever watch. That was a man amongst boys. If you've ever seen any tape from that season, Adrian Peterson, one of the best running backs of all time. Definitely the best running back of my young fandom generation. So I would say that. The next question comes from Corey Neer, who says, "With Drew Forbes opting out, how did the Browns end up filling the hole at right guard? Will it be Teller? Will it be Hubbard? Or somebody in free agency?" I mean, I don't know how much Drew Forbes changes the answer to what that hole was going to be filled with, because it seemed like it was going to be Wyatt Teller or Chris Hubbard to begin with, and Drew Forbes was kind of a dark horse for that spot. So I don't think it changes much, quite frankly. I think it's going to be Hubbard, but I could see it being Teller. But I think it's going to be Hubbard because Nick Chubb really likes Hubbard. That's one of his buddies on the team. And, you're going to want to make sure Nick Chubb's happy and feel like he can run behind whoever is there. And, Hubbard, for what it's worth, did a pretty good job blocking on the edge at times for Nick Chubb. So I think that's going to be the guy. But that's it for the questions. Thank you guys for asking them. I always appreciate it. It's one of the highlights of my week is reading the questions that you guys have asked throughout all these platforms. But again, guys, thank you guys for asking. Have a great day and have a good night.